Senator Mitch McConnell, who tends to shy away from ever criticizing Donald Trump, has published an op-ed in the Washington Post. And his wording here is very aggressive against Donald Trump's decision to abandon Kurdish allies in northern Syria. I'm gonna read you a few excerpts from it. And I will say, just to preface this, that while I agree that it was a bad idea for Trump to abruptly abandon Kurdish allies who have helped us defeat ISIS in northern Syria, the wording here makes me sick to my stomach because it reminds you of why so many Americans have this positive reaction to Donald Trump doing what he's doing, because America has been engaged in endless wars. There's legitimate frustration about that, but there's nuance when it comes to the Kurds in northern Syria. We've talked about it throughout, this story developing. Now let me give you some excerpts. He writes, and this is in the first paragraph, withdrawing US forces from Syria is a grave strategic mistake. It will leave the American people and homeland less safe, embolden our enemies, and weaken important alliances. Sadly, the recently announced pullout risks repeating the Obama administration's reckless withdrawal from Iraq, which facilitated the rise of the Islamic State in the first place.
Okay, yeah, I can't stand it. There's no winners here. Both Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump are wrong, but they disagree. So what do I mean by that? It's not about partisanship. It's about the driving force behind both of their ideas. So the driving force behind Donald Trump's idea is, I got bullied by Erdogan. I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I just, he said he was gonna come in one way or another. So I just left, panicked and abrupt, totally unacceptable. If a progressive president was in and wanted to withdraw from Syria and from the Middle East, I would be ecstatic. If they said to me, oh, I'm gonna do it in one day, I'd be like, no, don't do it in one day, that's crazy. And that's exactly what Donald Trump did. But Mitch McConnell bringing out all the old ridiculous talking points about how we have to be in the Middle East forever is totally preposterously wrong. Keeping the homeland safe. Wait a minute, this particular conflict is between Turkey and the Kurds. What does that have to do with keeping us safe? Turkey is the ostensible bad guy in this scenario. Turkey is one of our top allies. It's the second biggest army in NATO, our top alliance. It's not like Turkey's gonna attack us. It's not like the Kurds are gonna attack us. Yes, there's ISIS fighters that the Kurds are holding, and yes, some have escaped. But to say somehow this endangers San Antonio or Seattle is preposterous.
But this is what Republicans typically do, and it's not just Republicans. Every once in a while you hear it from hawkish Democrats as well. They'll fearmonger in order to garner support for US imperialism. And in this case, the reason why this op-ed, even though I agree that Trump's decision was a bad one, this op-ed is just dripping with pro-American imperialism. So let me give you a quick, go ahead.
No, sure. So I was just gonna say Trump's decision reflects an absence of cultural understanding or historical understanding of the relationship between the Kurds and Turkey itself. But I'll let you continue and then I'll jump in.
Just to give you an example of why I feel this way in regard to what McConnell wrote. He writes the following: there is no substitute for American leadership. No other nation can match our capability to spearhead multinational campaigns that can defeat terrorists and help stabilize the region. Libya and Syria both testify to the bloody results of the Obama administration's leading from behind. And then he further writes, if we Americans care at all about the post-World War II international system that has sustained an unprecedented era of peace, prosperity, and technological development, we must recognize that we are its indispensable nation. We built this system, we sustained it, and we have benefited from it most of all.
Okay, so two quick things. One is, there's a secret reason why he's writing this op-ed. It isn't about Turkey and the Kurds. It isn't even about ISIS. It isn't even about the military-industrial complex. That's the surface reason. The secret reason is, he's got an approval rating in Kentucky of 36%. He's worried about losing his seat, and at some point he might have to turn on Trump. So he's got to hang that on something that is a Republican talking point. He can't say, I agree with the Democrats on impeachment. He has to say, look, I can't stand the Democrats, they're the worst, I don't agree with Pelosi, But look at what Trump did, ruining our standing in the world and et cetera, et cetera. So this op-ed, while I happen to disagree with 80% to 90% of its content, is a very important marker for the Senate Majority Leader, the most important person that will determine whether Donald Trump stays in office or not, beginning to turn. If he's gonna turn, he needs an excuse. This is that excuse. Now, real quick on the substance of it, this whole idea of American imperialism working in the Middle East is a hilarious joke.
Yeah.
I mean, he even says at one point, Syria has been a model for this increasingly successful approach. Does Syria look like it's been a model for a successful approach? It looks like an absolute nightmare and a disaster for everyone involved, including us. He lives on a different planet. This is neocon 101. On the substance of withdrawing or not withdrawing in a smart, strategic way, I prefer Trump to McConnell.
Absolutely. So, a few different points here. First of all, what Trump did was reckless and turned his back on the Kurds, who have had their backs turned on systematically by many different foreign actors for decades, right? However, look at all the fallacies in what Mitch McConnell stands for and says. A progressive response is one that is against war, is against endless wars, is pro-diplomacy, is pro-multilateralism and peace, but is not the same as an arbitrary withdrawal, leaving our friends to be massacred, right? So look at what Mitch McConnell says and see how incredibly hypocritical it is. First of all, he criticizes Obama for Obama's disastrous actions in Libya and to a lesser extent in Syria. However, what Obama did in Libya, and again, a little bit in Syria, is exactly what the Republicans have done for decades and Mitch McConnell would fully support. He may not have supported some of the implementation of it, as we know all too well, but this is Obama implemented the Republican neocon active action when he invaded Libya, destabilizing the country, human trafficking, organs being sold, and so on, from Bantu Africans and black Africans, like Southern Africans or Central Africans. He says he wants American leadership and that we have allies in our causes in the Middle East. Who are these allies and where is the American leadership? Is there any evidence that any of us have actually seen that American troops in foreign countries actually decreases terrorism in this country? It actually projects an image that we are ignorant of these people, we're interested in colonizing and engaging in imperial activity, and it makes us seem like almost every major global poll I've read indicates that America is the most feared country in the world, not ISIS, not countries like Iran. It's America that's most feared in the world because we have this myth that we feed ourselves not just of exceptionalism, but we as some sort of imperial leader of humanity in the world when our actions are exactly the opposite. That's why I support progressive leaders. You all probably know I've joined Bernie Sanders' campaign because it's no more endless wars. We need a new approach that is based on multilateralism and humanity and listening to other people. That's what we got to do.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so
Thanks.
You mentioned imperialism, colonialism. Donald Trump literally said the other day that they're fighting over a bunch of sand anyway, and there's plenty of sand there. Does anything sound more colonialist than that? And by the way, also totally not true. Northern Syria doesn't have a lot of sand. In fact, it's part of what is known as the Fertile Crescent. It's the opposite. But of course, in the colonial mindset is, it's a bunch of Arabs fighting. None of them are Arabs, by the way. Kurds and Turks are not Arabs. Fighting over sand, it's not sand. It's very, fertile there, literally in terms of vegetation and farming, et cetera. So a total misunderstanding of the region, total lack of homework by Donald Trump. We've talked about it 100 times now, but what's interesting is the Republicans turning against him, even though it's for all the wrong reasons. And Dan Crenshaw is another one, just came out and said that his withdrawal allowed, quote, chaos to ensue. And now that critique is actually more legitimate. Mm-hmm. That is true. It did lead to chaos. And then even again, Chris Wallace on Fox News asking, you're saying this is a ceasefire. It sounds more like a surrender. And he asked very legitimate questions like, wait, so does Turkey just have that land now? Is this an occupation? Are the Kurds being driven from that land? And if people are being driven from a land, there's another term for that. It's called ethnic cleansing.
Yes.
And so is that the official US policy now? So I don't want this Hobson's choice of either permanent imperialism or ethnic cleansing.
It's a false choice.
It's exactly a false choice. Yeah. We can actually do smart strategy to withdraw from the region while empowering our local allies, but do it in a way that is deliberative so that we actually can protect our interests and our allies' interests and not just blunder into this chaos.
And Mitch McConnell ends this op-ed saying, America's wars will be endless only if America refuses to win them. So what I'd like to ask Mitch McConnell is, what does winning look like? Like, you tell me, what does winning mean? Is winning what your buddy George Bush did in Afghanistan and Iraq? I'm not sure there's been much winning that's happened in either country.
With a preemptive war in Iraq based on complete and utter lies regarding weapons of mass destruction.
So Mitch McConnell represents destabilization of these parts of the world. Donald Trump, in a short-term sense, because of his lack of knowledge or understanding of anything related to the region, it seems, at least its history, also represents destabilization. We don't want destabilization. We want compassion, collectivity, and multilateralism.
So yeah, last thing on that, every once in a while the right wing says, oh, you guys, it's a talking point they do. You have Trump derangement syndrome, you're opposed to anything Trump does. No, we're opposed to 90% of what Donald Trump does is because 90% of it is filled with ignorance, arrogance, and foolishness. But short term, he's created bigger problems than McConnell, Crenshaw, and the other Republicans. But in the long term, we're all in agreement that Trump's idea of withdrawing from the Middle East is much more correct than McConnell's and Crenshaw's and the rest of the Republican Party. So no, we evaluate things on a case-by-case basis based on the actual facts of that situation. And the reality is, do not, and what I'm worried about is that a lot of the Democratic Party establishment, and certainly the establishment media, is going to get seduced by the arguments of McConnell simply because they are opposed to Donald Trump.
Well, a lot of them have already been seduced by that idea, and it was well before Donald Trump even came into office to begin with.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point, and they've been for perpetual war, and they don't ask the obvious questions that Ramesh just asked. Did we win in Afghanistan? What did we win? And McConnell indicates here that he'd like to be back in Iraq, that it was a terrible idea to withdraw from Iraq. So you want us to go back into Iraq? Are you insane? What did we win in Iraq? But the media never asks those questions, and it is really stunning that they have dropped the ball on that. Now they say, well, it was wrong reasons to go into Iraq, but you never talk about these absurd Republican ideas of staying in the Middle East forever, let alone starting a new war with Iran. So no, we evaluate things as they are, not based on partisan politics or personalities. And yes, in the long run, the idea of getting out of the Middle East that Trump has is not a wrong one. He just executed it very, very poorly.
I totally agree. And I gotta add one final thing, and it's more directed toward members of the left who have bought into this notion that Donald Trump does wanna end the endless wars. Like, he has no leg to stand on making that argument when he has expanded the Obama era drone strikes, when he continues to engage in that war in Yemen. He is not an anti-war person.
And increase the military budget to record proportions as well.
And great points, guys. And just brought in new troops to Saudi Arabia. Why do we have new US troops to Saudi Arabia? See, that's why, guys, look, Trump, if he really meant withdrawing from the Middle East, like I just told you a second ago, I believe that, I think that is correct. But he doesn't believe that. It's all situational. Oh, I've got a Trump Tower in Turkey. Look, it could be 1,000 different reasons why, mainly his ignorance. It could be Trump Tower, I don't know. But for whatever reason, in that moment, he's like, nah, I'm gonna abandon the Kurds and I'm gonna withdraw troops. Now, did he withdraw them out of all of Syria? No, they're in southeastern Syria right now anyway. And then he goes and puts new troops into Saudi Arabia. So where's the principle? So anyone defending Trump on principles, the only principle Donald Trump in reality has is what is to the benefit of Donald Trump.
May I just make one last point? I think, and I know you have done great coverage on this. We should have a lot of compassion and feel for what's happening to the Kurdish people. And this is not a new issue. These people have been systematically slaughtered for decades by all sorts of national forces, multinational, different countries, the Syrians, the Turks, and so on. And they used to be their own country, Kurdistan. It's just important to understand that the Kurdish people have been systematically slaughtered for decades, and our reckless actions with our so-called buddies who helped us beat ISIS are now adding to that cause.
Look, we keep saying last point, but these are all very important, and I'm gonna add one more too then. So the other day, Donald Trump literally said that, hey, this is good, the Turks are cleaning out the area. It's an exact reference to ethnic cleansing. And he said, oh, they're just moving people out. Now, if you remember, the Turks also moved people out of that same area before, and they were the Armenians.
Yep.
And that's called a genocide. So he uses that language with no regard and no knowledge of it. And if he does know it, he doesn't care, and seems to be celebrating yet another ethnic cleansing that's happening in the area. And no one has an answer to the questions that I've been asking, Chris Wallace has been asking. What happens to the citizens that lived in that area, the Kurds that lived in that area? Is it just the military has to move out, or does every single civilian have to be driven out of that area that is 20 miles deep, but 400 kilometers long, so about 280 miles long? So that is it a permanent occupation that Turkey is going to do of that area? And what happens to those citizens? This does not have a good history, and we keep saying never again, and here it is, it's happening today. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.